Marcus understood, finally, why everyone described her as dangerous. It wasn't because she was cruel or heartless. It was because she'd been forced to become untouchable in order to survive, and that untouchability had become a prison. Your Majesty, what if I told you that showing appropriate emotion might actually make you more effective as a leader, not less? I would ask you to explain your reasoning. That people trust leaders who seem genuinely invested in their welfare. Someone who shows that they care about their subjects' happiness, who admits to having preferences and feelings, who can laugh at their own mistakes, that's someone worth following. Queen Serenith considered this with the same analytical approach she applied to everything else. You're suggesting that strategic vulnerability could enhance political effectiveness. I'm suggesting that being genuine isn't strategic, it's just being genuine. But yes, people respond better to leaders who seem like real people rather than perfect machines. And you believe my subjects would respond positively to seeing my personal preferences and emotional responses. I think your subjects would be honored to discover that their queen is as complex and interesting as they are. The wall crystals shifted through a spectrum of colors Marcus couldn't identify, but Queen Serenith's expression suggested she was processing possibilities she'd never considered. Lieutenant Reed, if I were to attempt this casual social interaction, would you remain available for guidance? As long as you need me, Your Majesty. In that case, she said, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled without calculating the political implications. Perhaps you could explain why humans find it necessary to discuss the quality of their sleep with relative strangers. Marcus had always thought military training prepared you for anything, but nothing in the Earth Defense Academy curriculum had covered teaching an alien queen how to make casual conversation without accidentally issuing royal decrees. His third week on Valethia Prime was becoming an exercise in cultural diplomacy that would either revolutionize interstellar relations or get him exiled to the furthest reaches of space. Remember, Your Majesty, he said as they walked through the palace gardens, when someone asks how you're feeling, they don't want a comprehensive medical report. But what if I'm experiencing interesting metabolic variations due to seasonal atmospheric changes? Queen Serenith paused beside a crystalline fountain that played music instead of water, her bioluminescent skin patterns shifting to curious blues. Surely that information would be valuable for maintaining optimal social health. Unless you're talking to a doctor, the correct response is something like "I'm fine, thank you," or "having a lovely day." Even if I'm not having a lovely day. Especially if you're not having a lovely day. Small talk is about social connection, not actual information exchange. Queen Serenith made another note on her personal data pad, which had evolved from mining rights documentation into what appeared to be a comprehensive guide to human social behavior. This explains why Chancellor Vorth looked alarmed when I shared my detailed analysis of yesterday's digestive efficiency ratings. Marcus tried not to laugh. Your Majesty, perhaps we should practice on someone with lower stakes than your Chancellor. Lower stakes? Someone whose opinion of you won't affect galactic trade agreements. They had reached the palace's main social area, where Queen Serenith's court members typically gathered for what Marcus had learned they called casual audience hours. Though nothing about the rigidly formal interactions he'd observed seemed particularly casual. "Lieutenant Reed," came a voice from behind them, and Marcus turned to find Lord Kellyan Vex, the Queen's chief advisor, approaching with the kind of smile that suggested sharp objects hidden behind diplomatic courtesy. "How fortunate to find you providing Her Majesty with guidance." "Lord Vex," Queen Serenith replied with perfect formality, "Lieutenant Reed is assisting me with cultural exchange protocols." "Indeed. And how is this cultural exchange progressing?" Marcus felt the subtle tension in the air and realized he was witnessing palace politics in action. Lord Vex's tone carried just enough skepticism to be insulting without being overtly treasonous. "Very well, thank you," the Queen replied, and Marcus recognized her attempt to apply their casual conversation lessons. "The weather has been particularly pleasant for outdoor meetings." Lord Vex blinked, clearly unprepared for His Majesty to comment on meteorological conditions. "Ah yes, Your Majesty, quite pleasant. And how are you feeling today, Lord Vex?" "I'm fine." The advisor glanced between Marcus and the Queen with growing confusion. "Your Majesty, is everything normal?" "I'm having a lovely day," Queen Serenith replied with the careful precision of someone following a script. "How is your family?" Lord Vex stared at her as if she'd suddenly started speaking in ancient dialects. "My family is, well, Your Majesty, thank you for asking." Marcus watched the exchange with growing understanding of why Queen Serenith had acquired a reputation for being unapproachable. Her court members had clearly never experienced casual conversation with her, and they were responding to her attempts at normal social interaction, as if she developed a concerning medical condition. "Excellent," the Queen continued, warming to her theme. "And are you enjoying the pleasant weather for outdoor activities?" "Your Majesty," Lord Vex said slowly, "perhaps we should discuss the quarterly trade reports. I have several urgent matters requiring your attention." "Of course." Queen Serenith's patterns shifted to cooler colors, and Marcus could see her retreating back into formal mode. "Lieutenant Reed, thank you for the cultural exchange session." As Lord Vex led the Queen away for what Marcus suspected would be a series of pointed questions about her recent behavior, he found himself approached by Captain Lysara Neth, the Queen's personal guard, whose pointed ears and silver markings identified her as Valethian nobility. "Lieutenant Reed," she said quietly, "may I speak with you privately?" They moved to a secluded alcove, where the musical fountains provided acoustic cover for confidential conversations. "Captain Neth, is there a problem with my presence here?" "That depends on your intentions regarding Her Majesty." Lysara's expression was serious, but not hostile. "In the past 3 weeks, she's displayed more emotional variation than I've observed in the previous 3 years. And that concerns you?" "It concerns certain members of the court who prefer Her Majesty to remain predictable." Lysara glanced toward where Lord Vex was undoubtedly questioning the Queen about her newfound interest in casual conversation. "There are factions within the nobility who benefit from her isolation." Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. They want her to stay unapproachable. An isolated ruler is a dependent ruler. If Her Majesty never forms personal connections, she relies entirely on her advisors for emotional support and social interaction. Lysara's tone carried the careful neutrality of someone discussing dangerous political realities. "Your presence disrupts that dynamic." "Captain, are you warning me away from Queen Serenith?" "I'm warning you that there are people who will view your influence as a threat to their power." Lysara studied him with the intensity of someone evaluating potential allies. "The question is whether you believe Her Majesty's well-being is worth the political complications." Marcus thought about Queen Serenith's careful attempts at casual conversation, her surprise at the concept of personal preferences, her admission that she'd spent decades suppressing emotional responses for political survival. "Captain, how long has she been alone?" "Since she inherited the throne at 17. 23 years of perfect isolation disguised as political necessity. And in all that time, no one has ever just talked to her as a person instead of a political figure. You're the first person I've seen make her laugh, Lieutenant. You're also the first person I've seen her trust with genuine questions about her own feelings." Marcus looked across the social area, where Queen Serenith was listening to Lord Vex with the polite attention of someone who'd learned to hide her thoughts behind diplomatic courtesy. But now that he knew what to look for, he could see the subtle signs of loneliness in her posture, the careful distance she maintained even from her own advisors. "Captain Neth, what would happen if Queen Serenith became less isolated?" She might discover that she's capable of ruling through inspiration rather than intimidation. She might realize that her subjects would follow her out of genuine loyalty rather than fear. Lysara's expression suggested she found these possibilities appealing. She might also become significantly harder for her advisors to manipulate. And Lord Vex and his allies wouldn't appreciate that change. Lord Vex has spent years positioning himself as Her Majesty's primary source of counsel and emotional support. If she no longer needs his guidance for every decision. Lysara let the implication hang in the air. Marcus understood. Queen Serenith's advisors had been maintaining her isolation not to protect her, but to control her. Captain, does the Queen realize what's been happening? I suspect she's beginning to. Your presence has given her a reference point for what genuine care looks like. Lysara glanced toward the Queen, who was still enduring Lord Vex's pointed questions with patient courtesy. The question is what happens when she fully understands how she's been manipulated. As if summoned by their conversation, Queen Serenith politely extracted herself from Lord Vex's interrogation and approached their alcove. Lieutenant Reed, Captain Neth, she said, though Marcus noticed her bioluminescent patterns were displaying colors he'd learned to associate with frustration. I believe I require additional practice with casual conversation. How did your talk with Lord Vex go? Marcus asked. He expressed concern about my recent behavioral variations and suggested that excessive informal interaction might compromise my political effectiveness. Her patterns shifted to deeper blues. He recommended that I limit my cultural exchange sessions to more structured, supervised encounters. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. And what did you tell him? I told him that I would consider his recommendation. Queen Serenith's expression was carefully neutral, but her patterns betrayed underlying turmoil. Lieutenant Reed, may I ask you a personal question? Always, Your Majesty. Do you believe Lord Vex is correct? That my attempts at casual social interaction are compromising my ability to lead effectively? Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd been told for so long that her emotional responses were weaknesses that she'd almost forgotten they were strengths. Your Majesty, I think the only thing compromising your ability to lead effectively is the belief that you have to choose between being a good ruler and being a genuine person. The wall crystals around them pulsed with sudden warm light, and Queen Serenith's patterns shifted to colors Marcus had never seen before, something that looked like hope mixed with determination. In that case, she said quietly, I believe my cultural education should continue, regardless of Lord Vex's concerns. Marcus smiled, realizing that Queen Serenith was finally beginning to understand the difference between political advice and personal freedom. Your Majesty, what would you like to learn about next? I would like to understand, she said with the careful precision of someone asking a dangerous question, what humans mean when they talk about friendship. The Festival of Stellar Harmony had always been Queen Serenith's least favorite royal obligation. 3 days of ceremonial appearances, formal speeches, and carefully choreographed interactions with subjects who treated her like a beautiful but potentially explosive piece of art. But this year, as Marcus watched her prepare for the opening ceremony, something fundamental had changed in her approach to royal duty. Lieutenant Reed, she said, adjusting the crystal crown that had been worn by Valethian queens for centuries, I've made a decision that Lord Vex will almost certainly describe as politically catastrophic. Those tend to be the most interesting decisions, Marcus replied, trying not to think about how the formal coronation robes made her look like captured starlight given physical form. What's the plan? I'm going to tell my people the truth. Marcus felt his diplomatic training sound several simultaneous alarms. Which truth, specifically? All of it, that I've been lonely for 23 years. That I've made decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. That I've been letting my advisors maintain my isolation because I was afraid that genuine connection would make me vulnerable. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to determined gold, and that a human lieutenant taught me the difference between being respected and being loved. Before Marcus could respond, the chamber doors burst open to admit Lord Vex and 3 other senior advisors, all wearing expressions that suggested they detected treason in the air. "Your Majesty," Lord Vex announced with barely controlled panic, "we've received disturbing reports about your planned festival address." "Have you?" Queen Serenith's tone carried the kind of dangerous calm that had probably inspired half the terrifying stories about her. "And what aspect of my planned remarks concerns you?" "Your Majesty, Captain Neth informed us that you intend to discuss personal matters during the ceremonial address." Lord Vex glanced at Marcus with undisguised hostility. "Surely you understand that revealing private information would compromise your political authority." "Lord Vex, do you believe my subjects love me?" The question caught him off guard. "Your Majesty, love is irrelevant to effective governance. Respect and obedience are sufficient for maintaining political stability." "Answer the question, Lord Vex. Do my people love me, or do they simply fear disappointing me?" Marcus watched the advisor struggle with a question that apparently had never occurred to him. "Your Majesty, affection is less reliable than fear as a motivational tool." "I see." Queen Serenith's patterns shifted to colors Marcus recognized as barely contained fury. "And how long have you been operating under the assumption that my subjects' fear was preferable to their genuine loyalty?" "Your Majesty, I don't understand." "You don't understand because you've spent 23 years ensuring that I remained isolated enough to depend on your counsel for every decision." The Queen's voice carried the kind of authority that made space itself seem to pay attention. "You've maintained my loneliness as a tool for controlling my choices." Lord Vex's expression shifted from confusion to calculation to something approaching panic. "Your Majesty, I have always acted in the best interests of the realm." Lieutenant Marcus Reed had received exactly 3 pieces of advice about Queen Serenith of Valethia Prime. First, don't look directly into her silver eyes unless you want to spend the rest of your life questioning reality. Second, never interrupt her when she's speaking, because the last person who tried was found frozen solid in his own quarters. Third, whatever you do, don't let her think you find her attractive, because apparently she had a habit of collecting admirers the way other people collected rare minerals. Marcus was beginning to suspect that military intelligence had gotten their information from people who watched too many dramatic holovids. "Lieutenant Reed," announced the court herald, whose voice echoed through the crystalline throne room with all the warmth of a funeral dirge. "Her Radiant Majesty, Queen Serenith, Sovereign of the Valethian Empire, Guardian of the Stellar Roots and Keeper of the Crystal Throne, will now grant you audience." Marcus straightened his dress uniform and tried not to think about the fact that his commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, had developed what the medical corps diplomatically termed acute diplomatic anxiety, and what everyone else recognized as complete terror at the prospect of meeting the Queen in person. "Just deliver the proposal, maintain professional distance, and try not to stare," Martinez had wheezed from his hospital bed. "Everyone who spends time alone with her comes back different." The throne room itself defied every principle of architecture Marcus thought he understood. The walls curved impossibly upward, meeting at angles that shouldn't exist in normal 3-dimensional space. Gravity flowed in gentle spirals, allowing crystalline formations to grow from ceiling to floor in patterns that were both beautiful and completely impractical. The floor beneath his feet pulsed with soft bioluminescence that seemed to respond to his heartbeat. And then there was Queen Serenith herself. She sat on a throne carved from a single crystal that appeared to exist in several dimensions simultaneously, and Marcus immediately understood why grown men lost their ability to form coherent sentences in her presence. Her skin held the pale blue luminescence of captured starlight, and her pointed ears swept back from a face that belonged in classical sculpture rather than practical politics. Her silver hair fell in waves that seemed to move according to their own gravitational field, and when she looked at him, her eyes held depths that suggested she could see through time itself. "Lieutenant Reed," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made his bones resonate in pleasant ways. "I understand you're here to discuss mining rights in the Kepler sector." "Yes, Your Majesty." Marcus was pleased to note that his voice remained steady despite the fact that his brain was currently providing unhelpful commentary about how intelligence reports had failed to mention that the Queen was approximately 17 different kinds of stunning. Earth Diplomatic Corps has prepared a comprehensive proposal for shared development of the crystal fields. Shared development. Queen Serenith leaned forward slightly, and Marcus caught a glimpse of something unexpected in her expression, curiosity mixed with what might have been loneliness. An interesting concept. Most species who approach us prefer to discuss terms of surrender. Earth prefers cooperation to conquest, Your Majesty. We believe mutual benefit creates stronger partnerships than intimidation. Something shifted in the Queen's demeanor, subtle but unmistakable. The crystalline walls of the throne room pulsed with softer colors, and Marcus realized the bioluminescent patterns were responding to her emotional state. "Partnership," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Lieutenant Reed, are you familiar with the warnings your people have undoubtedly shared about me?" Marcus chose honesty over diplomacy. "I've been told you're dangerous, Your Majesty. Ruthless, merciless, and completely unpredictable. And yet you don't seem particularly terrified." "Should I be?" Queen Serenith was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those impossible silver eyes. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its formal edge. "Most people are. It's convenient for maintaining political stability, but occasionally I wonder what it would be like to have a conversation without someone calculating their survival odds." There it was, a crack in the perfect facade that intelligence reports had described. Marcus felt his diplomatic training warring with human instinct. Protocol said to maintain professional distance. Common sense said to recognize vulnerability when he saw it. "Your Majesty, would you like to discuss the mining proposal over coffee? I find business conversations go better when they don't feel like formal interrogations." The Queen blinked, clearly unprepared for casual suggestions. "Coffee. It's a human beverage, mildly stimulating, often consumed during negotiations. I brought some samples if you're interested in trying something new." You brought coffee samples to a diplomatic meeting with the most feared ruler in 3 sectors. I brought coffee samples to a meeting with someone who might enjoy discovering something she's never tried before. The silence stretched long enough for Marcus to wonder if he just committed an unforgivable breach of protocol. Then Queen Serenith smiled, not the controlled, political expression he'd seen in official broadcasts, but something genuine and surprised. "Lieutenant Reed, I believe you may be the first person in 20 years to offer me something without expecting anything in return. The offer comes with the expectation that you'll share your honest opinion of the coffee. I take beverage recommendations seriously." "Very well." She rose from her throne with fluid grace, and Marcus noticed that she moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to control every gesture. "We shall discuss mining rights and coffee quality in my private chambers. Fair warning, if you're planning to assassinate me, you'll find the experience disappointingly difficult." "I'll try to contain my disappointment, Your Majesty." As she led him through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves according to her mood, Marcus began to suspect that the most dangerous thing about Queen Serenith wasn't her legendary ruthlessness. It was the possibility that everything he'd been told about her was wrong. Her private chambers turned out to be surprisingly modest, furnished with comfortable seating and walls lined with what appeared to be books from dozens of different worlds. A crystalline window provided a view of Valethia Prime's triple sunset, painting everything in shades of gold and violet. "I must admit," the the Queen said as Marcus prepared coffee using a portable synthesis unit. "I'm curious about your lack of fear. Are humans naturally brave, or are you simply unaware of my reputation?" "I'm aware of your reputation, Your Majesty, but I'm also aware that reputations are often more useful than accurate." Marcus handed her a cup, noting how she held it with the careful attention of someone examining alien technology. "For example, Earth military intelligence describes you as coldly logical to the point of inhumanity. But someone who's coldly logical doesn't usually decorate their throne room with bioluminescent patterns that respond to emotional states." Queen Serenith paused with the cup halfway to her lips. "You noticed the wall patterns. Hard to miss. They've been shifting colors since I arrived. Right now they're showing curiosity with undertones of loneliness, maybe." "The crystals respond to Valethian bioelectric fields. Most species can't interpret the patterns." She sipped the coffee, and her expression shifted to genuine surprise. "This is actually quite pleasant." High praise from someone who rules stellar trade routes. "Lieutenant Reed, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Your Majesty. Do you find me frightening?" Marcus considered his answer carefully, studying her face in the light of the triple sunset. What he saw was someone who'd been wearing armor so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable. "I find you fascinating, Your Majesty. And I suspect that might be the most dangerous thing about you. Not your power or your reputation, but the fact that you're far more complex than anyone expects." The wall crystals pulsed with colors Marcus couldn't identify, but Queen Serenith's smile suggested they were pleasant ones. "Lieutenant Reed, I believe your diplomatic mission just became considerably more interesting than either of us anticipated." As the sun set over Valethia Prime and the coffee grew cold in their cups, Marcus began to understand that he'd been sent to negotiate with a legend. But he was having coffee with a woman who'd been waiting 20 years for someone to see the difference. Marcus's second week on Valethia Prime had taught him several important lessons about alien psychology and interstellar politics. First, Queen Serenith's terrifying morning court sessions were actually elaborate theater designed to maintain political stability. Second, she apologized to her houseplants when she forgot to water them. Third, the most feared ruler in 3 sectors had apparently never learned how to make small talk without turning it into a formal diplomatic negotiation. "Lieutenant Reed," she said during their daily coffee meeting, "I require your assistance with a matter of cultural interpretation." "Of course, Your Majesty, what's the question?" "When humans ask about the weather, are they genuinely seeking meteorological data, or is this what you call small talk?" Marcus paused in the act of reviewing mining survey reports. "That depends. Are you asking because someone inquired about the weather, or because you provided them with a detailed atmospheric analysis when they said, 'Nice day, isn't it?'" The Queen's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Marcus had learned, indicated mild embarrassment. Ambassador Vex from the Centauri Coalition seemed surprised when I explained the correlation between stellar radiation and precipitation cycles. "Your Majesty, when someone comments on the weather, they're usually just trying to start a friendly conversation. The appropriate response is something like, 'Yes, it's lovely or perfect day for a walk.' But what if the meteorological data is genuinely interesting? Save it for people who specifically ask about meteorology." Queen Serenith made a note on her personal data pad with the serious concentration of someone studying advanced theoretical physics. This explains why Captain Torres looked confused when I detailed the mineral composition of the morning mist. Marcus was beginning to understand why Queen Serenith had acquired a reputation for being cold and unapproachable. Her idea of casual conversation involved the kind of precision most people reserved for scientific papers. "Your Majesty, may I ask how you usually interact with your advisors and court members?" "I provide clear directives based on comprehensive analysis of available data. Efficient communication reduces the potential for misunderstandings. And how do they respond to your efficient communication? With immediate compliance and expressions of profound respect. She paused, her silver eyes reflecting something that might have been uncertainty. Though I have noticed they rarely engage in voluntary social interaction with me. Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. When was the last time someone on your court disagreed with you about something trivial? Disagreed with me. The concept seemed to genuinely perplex her. Why would they disagree with me? I base my decisions on thorough research and logical analysis. What about personal preferences? Food, music, entertainment. Personal preferences are subjective and therefore irrelevant to governance. Your Majesty, what's your favorite color? Queen Serenith stared at him as if he'd asked her to explain the meaning of existence in interpretive dance. My favorite color. The one you find most visually appealing. The one that makes you happy when you see it. That's not. She struggled with the concept for several seconds before her expression cleared. The aurora patterns during storm season, purple and gold spirals against dark space. There. Pleasing. There you go, that's a personal preference. But it serves no political purpose. Not everything needs to serve a political purpose, Your Majesty. Some things can just be enjoyable. The wall crystals pulsed with colors Marcus was learning to interpret as confusion mixed with curiosity. Queen Serenith set down her coffee cup and studied him with the intensity she usually reserved for state documents. Lieutenant Reed, are you suggesting that effective leadership includes enjoying things? I'm suggesting that effective leadership includes being human, or in your case, being Valethian. People follow leaders they can relate to, not just ones they fear. But fear ensures compliance. Fear ensures obedience. Respect and affection inspire loyalty. There's a difference. Queen Serenith was quiet for a long time, processing this information with the same methodical approach she applied to everything else. Finally, she looked up from her contemplation. Would you be willing to provide instruction in personal preference identification and casual social interaction? Marcus blinked. You want me to teach you how to have normal conversations? I want to understand why my subjects maintain respectful distance rather than expressing genuine affection. If my communication methods are creating unintended barriers to effective leadership, then improvement is necessary. Your Majesty, are you asking me to help you learn how to be more approachable? I am requesting cultural education in human-style interpersonal relations. She paused, then added with careful precision, please. Marcus felt his heart do something complicated, as he realized that the galaxy's most feared ruler had just asked him for help with the same awkward politeness of someone learning a foreign language. I'd be honored to help, Your Majesty, but I should warn you that learning to be casual might feel uncomfortable at first. I have managed galactic trade negotiations and military campaigns. I believe I can handle casual conversation. Marcus grinned. We'll start with easy topics. Tell me about your favorite book. I don't read for pleasure. I read for information. Okay, what's the most interesting thing you've read recently that wasn't work-related? Queen Serenith looked genuinely stumped. Everything I read is work-related. What about before you became queen? Did you read anything just because you enjoyed it? For a moment her perfect composure cracked, revealing something vulnerable and almost childlike. There was a collection of poetry from Earth, something about someone named Shakespeare. The language patterns were beautiful. You like poetry? I found the emotional complexity fascinating. The way human writers could convey multiple layers of meaning through carefully chosen words. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to warm gold tones, though I suppose admitting that would be politically inadvisable. Why would enjoying poetry be politically inadvisable? Because it suggests emotional responses might influence my decision-making process. Marcus felt something shift in his understanding of her situation. Your Majesty, When did you decide that having a The silence in the chamber felt like the moment before a supernova. Your Majesty, Lord Vex said carefully, are you saying that that Lieutenant Reed has become? I'm saying that Lieutenant Reed has become the first person in 23 years to see past my crown to the woman underneath. Queen Sereneth's patterns blazed with colors that made the chamber's crystals sing in harmony. I'm also saying that I intend to tell my people exactly that during tonight's address. Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his understanding of interstellar diplomacy. Your Majesty, are you sure that's Marcus, she said, and the use of his first name in front of the advisors felt like a declaration of war against protocol. Do you trust me? With my life. Then trust me with this. The festival's opening ceremony took place in the Crystal Amphitheater, a natural formation that could hold 50,000 people, and had acoustics that allowed the Queen's voice to reach every corner without technological amplification. Marcus watched from the royal viewing area as Queen Sereneth approached the ceremonial podium, her formal robes replaced by something simpler that allowed her natural luminescence to shine through. My people, she began, and her voice carried the warmth Marcus had grown to recognize in their private conversations. I have something to tell you that I should have said years ago. The crowd settled into attentive silence, clearly expecting the usual formal address about unity and prosperity. I have been lonely, Queen Sereneth said simply. For 23 years I have stood before you as your sovereign, but I have never stood before you as myself. I have been so afraid of appearing weak that I forgot the strength that comes from genuine connection. Marcus could feel the crowd's attention sharpen, 50,000 people suddenly realizing they were hearing something unprecedented. I have made decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. I have allowed advisors to maintain my isolation because I believed that emotional distance was necessary for effective leadership. I was wrong. The amphitheater was so quiet Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. 3 weeks ago, a human lieutenant offered me coffee and treated me like a person rather than a political figure. He taught me that leadership built on fear creates obedience, but leadership built on genuine care creates loyalty. He showed me the difference between being respected and being loved. Queen Sereneth paused, her bioluminescent patterns visible to everyone in the amphitheater, broadcasting emotions she'd hidden for decades. My people, I don't want your fear. I don't want your obedience born from intimidation. I want your trust, your partnership, your willingness to build a future together because we care about each other's well-being. The response began as a murmur and grew into something Marcus had never heard before. 50,000 voices expressing genuine affection rather than dutiful respect. The sound was like music, like celebration, like collective joy finally given permission to exist. Furthermore, Queen Sereneth continued, and Marcus felt his heart skip as she looked directly at him, I want you to know that your queen has discovered what humans call love. Lieutenant Marcus Reed of Earth has become more precious to me than any crown or political alliance. If you will accept him, I would be honored to make him not just my partner, but your prince consort. The amphitheater erupted into celebration that shook the crystal formations and sent harmonic vibrations through the planet's core. Marcus found himself surrounded by royal guards who were grinning rather than maintaining stoic professionalism, and by advisors who looked like they were reconsidering their career choices. Lieutenant Reed, Captain Neth said with barely contained amusement, I believe Her Majesty is requesting your presence on the ceremonial platform. Marcus made his way through the crowd, which parted with expressions of curiosity and welcome, rather than the fearful deference he'd observed during his first week. When he reached Queen Sereneth, she was radiant in ways that had nothing to do with her alien physiology. Your Majesty, he said quietly, are you sure about this? Marcus, she replied, and her smile held all the warmth that 23 years of isolation had been unable to extinguish. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The wedding took place 6 months later, in the same amphitheater where Queen Serenith had chosen love over political expedience. The ceremony combined Valethian traditions with human customs, creating something entirely new that somehow felt perfect for two people who'd found each other across the vast improbabilities of space. As Marcus adjusted to life as Prince Consort, he discovered that married life with an alien queen involved unexpected challenges, like learning to interpret bioluminescent mood displays during diplomatic meetings, or figuring out how to explain human humor to advisors who treated everything as potential state policy. But it also involved unexpected joys, like watching Serenith discover the simple pleasure of casual conversation, or seeing her subjects respond to her newfound warmth with loyalty that was stronger than any fear-based obedience could ever be. "Marcus," she said one evening as they walked through gardens where crystal formations sang lullabies to encourage plant growth, "do you ever regret that your diplomatic mission became so complicated?" Marcus considered the question, looking around at a life that bore no resemblance to anything he'd planned but somehow felt exactly right. "Your Majesty," he said, then corrected himself with a grin, "Serenith, the only thing I regret is that it took the galaxy so long to realize that the most dangerous thing about you wasn't your power. It was how much love you had to give, once someone showed you it was safe to offer it."